When I walked through the front door of my own condo that evening, the first thing I heard was a tearing sound. Long, slow, deliberate, like something being peeled away from a wound that had barely closed. The second thing I noticed was the smell. That sharp, dusty smell of old wallpaper adhesive hitting open air for the first time in years. And then I turned the corner from the entryway into the living room, and I stopped so hard my heel actually squeaked against the hardwood floor. My mother-in-law, Darlene, was standing on a step stool in the middle of my living room, both hands gripping the edge of the floral wallpaper I had chosen and hung myself 11 years ago, yanking it back in a wide, satisfying strip. A pile of curled paper scraps already covered the floor around her feet. The accent wall, the one I had spent an entire weekend perfecting, was half naked, raw drywall showing through in ragged patches like something had been clawing at it. "What are you doing?" I said. My voice came out quieter than I intended, a whisper, really, the kind of voice you use when you're not sure if what you're seeing is real. She turned around, completely calm, the way only Darlene can manage. 63 years old, hair freshly set, wearing one of her church blouses tucked into slacks, standing on my step stool in my living room, tearing apart my walls. She looked at me the way she always looked at me, like I was a student who had just given the wrong answer and she was patiently waiting for me to figure it out on my own. "Redecorating," she said simply. "This wallpaper is dated, Callie. It's got to go." I looked around the room again, slowly, like I was taking inventory. The couch was gone. My reading chair, the deep green velvet one I had found at an estate sale and reupholstered myself, was gone. Both of my cats' climbing trees were shoved into the corner by the window, and my two cats, Miso and Fig, were pressed together on the top platform, watching the chaos with wide, alarmed eyes, exactly the way I felt. Several boxes I didn't recognize were stacked along the far wall. The built-in shelves that had held my books and framed photos were bare. My things were simply gone. "Josh said you two are getting divorced," Darlene announced, stepping down from the stool and dusting her hands against each other with a little clap. "So I figured there's no time to waste. This place needs a complete overhaul before we list it." I felt the room tilt, just slightly, the way it does when you stand up too fast. "Before you list it," I repeated. "Well, it'll go for more if it's updated. The wallpaper alone is bringing down the comps." Let me back up, because to understand exactly how insane that moment was, you need to understand what this condo is, and what this marriage was, and what the last 19 years of my life looked like before they started unravelling on a Tuesday evening in early April while I was still wearing my lanyard from school. My name is Callie Marsh. I'm 46 years old. I teach 8th grade English at Ridgecrest Middle School, which sits at the edge of our suburb about 2 miles from where I live. I have been teaching there for 18 years. My students call me Ms. Marsh, and sometimes, when they think I can't hear them in the hallway, they call me the one who actually reads the books. I take that as a compliment. I have spent my adult life surrounded by other people's children, helping them find their voices through stories. And I have always believed, genuinely believed, that words matter. That saying the right thing at the right moment can change everything. 19 years of marriage will test that belief in ways you cannot imagine. I met Joshua Hargrove when I was 27 and he was 30. It was late October, not romantic at all. We were both waiting in line at the DMV in downtown Columbus, and he made a joke about the number system that was actually funny, which surprised me. He was tall, a little rumpled, the kind of handsome that sneaks up on you. He worked in commercial real estate, which at the time seemed stable and impressive. He had an easy laugh, and he listened when I talked, which was rarer than it should have been. We were married 18 months later, in a small ceremony in March, in the backyard of my parents' house, with tulips just starting to push through the cold ground. I want to be fair to Josh, even now. The early years were genuinely good. We bought our house in Sycamore Hills, A real house, with a yard and a garage, and we filled it with furniture we argued pleasantly about at IKEA, and a life that felt, if not perfect, then solidly ours. We talked about having kids, and then slowly stopped talking about it, without ever formally deciding anything. We had Miso first, a grey tabby who arrived as a kitten and immediately claimed Josh's pillow as her own personal property. We got Fig 2 years later, a chunky orange cat with a broken meow that came out as more of a squeak, and the four of us settled into the comfortable rhythms of a household that had found its shape. The condo came later. About 6 years ago, Josh's company transferred him to a regional office about 40 minutes north, and for a while he was commuting. But then the commute started killing him, so we talked about getting a smaller place up there that he could use during the week. That made sense at the time. Financially, we worked it out. I kept covering the Sycamore Hills mortgage, and Josh handled his end from his salary. But here's the detail that matters. The condo is in my name. My name on the deed, my name on the mortgage, my credit, my asset. We were clear about that from the beginning. Josh even said it, standing in the realtor's office signing papers. This is Callie's investment. Her name goes on everything. I had started staying at the condo more frequently in recent years, partly because the commute to Ridgecrest from Sycamore Hills had started feeling longer, and partly, if I'm being honest with myself, because things at home with Josh had grown quieter in a way that felt less peaceful and more like something slowly draining away. We didn't fight much. We didn't do much of anything much. I told myself it was just the natural settling of a long marriage. I told myself this was normal. That morning, the morning before I came home to find Darlene destroying my walls, Josh and I had argued. Not a screaming match, nothing dramatic, more like a conversation that finally said out loud what had been sitting in the room with us for months. I had asked him directly if he was happy. He had looked at me for a long moment and said, "Are you?" And somehow that non-answer felt like the most honest thing he'd said to me in 2 years. "I think we need to talk about where we're going," I had said. "Yeah," he said. I think so too. That was it. That was our entire conversation before I had to leave for school. I drove to Ridgecrest with my coffee going cold in the cup holder, taught 4 periods of 8th grade English. We were reading The Outsiders, which, given the day, felt almost too on the nose. Ate half a sandwich at my desk during lunch, attended a staff meeting about the spring literacy assessment, and drove back to the condo, where I found Darlene tearing the wallpaper off my walls. "Josh called you," I said. It wasn't a question. "He was very upset, Callie. He needed his mother." She said it with that particular tone she'd perfected over 19 years, the one that made me feel like the intruder in my own life. "I came right over. He gave you a key. He's always had a key. He practically lives here. He has a key for emergencies, Darlene, not for—" I gestured at the ravaged wall, the pile of paper scraps, the boxes, the missing furniture. "This." She tilted her head at me, and there it was, that look. The one I had been on the receiving end of since our very first Thanksgiving together, when I had brought a store-bought pie and she had smiled at me like I was a well-meaning but fundamentally misguided child. "You're overreacting," she said. "I'm trying to help." "Where is my furniture?" I asked. My voice was steadier now. Something cold and clear was settling into my chest, the way it does when shock starts converting into something more useful. "The couch was worn. I had Terence take it to the donation centre." Terence was her neighbour, a retired guy with a truck who apparently moonlighted as an accessory to property destruction. The chair was even worse. "That chair was not worn. That chair was mine." "Callie," she sighed, the long-suffering sigh. "You're being very dramatic about a chair." I stood there in my stripped, half-dismantled living room, looking at this woman who had spent 19 years treating me like a temporary inconvenience in her son's life, and I felt something shift inside me. Not break, shift. like a tectonic plate moving a centimetre, slow and massive and irreversible. I pulled out my phone and called Josh. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey," his voice was careful. "Your mother is in my condo," I said. "She has stripped the wallpaper off the accent wall, she has removed and apparently donated my couch and my reading chair, and she is standing here telling me this is because you told her we're getting divorced." A pause, long enough to tell me everything. "I might have mentioned that we've been having some problems," he said. "You told her we're divorcing." "I said things were difficult." "Josh!" I pressed 2 fingers against my forehead. "She's tearing apart my walls." "She's just trying to help. You know how she gets." And there it was. 23 words that summed up 19 years of being told I was too sensitive, too dramatic, reading too much into things. You know how she gets. As if Darlene's behaviour were a weather pattern I simply needed to accommodate, like rain. As if what I was standing in the middle of, my property, damaged, my belongings removed, my home invaded, was something I was somehow perceiving incorrectly. "Josh," I said again, quieter, "tell me exactly what you said to her." Another pause. Miso had climbed down from the cat tree and was now winding around my ankles, which she only did when she sensed something was wrong. Fig stayed on the platform, watching me with his big amber eyes. "I told her I thought it might be over," Josh said finally. "I was upset. I needed to talk to someone." I looked at Darlene, who had taken the opportunity to pick up her scraper again and was examining the wall with professional interest, as if our conversation were background noise. "And she took that as permission to come to my condo and start renovating," I said. "She's not renovating, she's just—" "Josh, stop." I took a breath. "I need you to understand something. This condo is in my name. The deed, the mortgage, every single piece of paper, which means your mother does not have the right to remove anything from it, damage anything in it, or make any decisions about what happens to it. Do you understand what I'm saying to you?" A third pause, shorter this time. "Callie, you're blowing this out of proportion." The cold thing in my chest spread a little further, because that wasn't Josh's voice anymore. Not really. That was Darlene's logic coming out of his mouth, the same way it always did, the same way it had been doing for years, so gradually I had almost stopped noticing. I lowered the phone without hanging up and looked at Darlene. "I need you to leave," I said, "right now, and I need the key." She turned around slowly, and she smiled at me, a small, patient smile that said she had been through this before, and she knew exactly how it ended. "Honey," she said, "you're upset. You've had a hard day. Why don't you sit down and I'll make us some tea and we can talk about this like adults." The fact that she had just suggested I sit down in a room she'd stripped of all seating did not appear to register with her at all. I stood there, phone still in my hand, Josh's voice coming through the speaker, saying something I was no longer listening to. Miso pressing warm and insistent against my shin. And I understood with sudden, awful clarity that this moment, this exact moment, with the torn wallpaper and the missing chair and Darlene's patient smile, was not an accident. It was not a misunderstanding. It was not. It was the logical conclusion of something that had been building for a very long time. And I had been too busy telling myself the story of a stable marriage to notice that the walls had been coming down long before Darlene ever touched them. I put the phone back to my ear. Josh was still talking. "And if you'd just calm down for a second, I think if we all sat together and— Josh," my voice was flat, "come get your mother, tonight. And you need to tell me what you said to her, exactly. Because whatever she heard, she took it as authorization to enter my property and remove my belongings. Do you understand how serious that is?" Silence. Then, "You're making this into a legal thing." "I'm stating facts," I said. "This condo is in my name. Your mother removed furniture from it without my consent. That has a legal name." He hung up. Not dramatically. Josh never did anything dramatically. He just quietly ended the call, the way he quietly ended most things he didn't want to deal with. I stood there holding my phone, the screen going dark in my hand. Darlene was watching me. She had set down the scraper. Her arms were folded now, and she had that particular expression she wore when she was recalibrating, reassessing which approach to try next. I had catalogued every version of that face over 19 years. The sympathetic version, the wounded version, the "I'm only trying to help" version. She was cycling through them now like a slot machine, settling on its next combination. "You should sit down," she said again, and I thought distantly, almost with dark amusement, that she genuinely did not register that there was nothing to sit on. "I'm not going to sit down," I said. "I'm going to ask you one more time, clearly, to give me the key and leave my home." "Callie." She unfolded her arms and took a step toward me, and her voice dropped into something softer, more intimate, the voice she used when she wanted to seem like we were on the same side. "I know you're upset. I know this is a hard time, but you have to understand. Josh is my son. He was devastated when he called me. He was crying." Something moved in my chest at that. Not sympathy for Darlene, but a small, involuntary pang for Josh, for the man I had spent 19 years with, crying on the phone to his mother about a conversation that had lasted all of 4 minutes before I had to leave for school. And then the pang dissolved, because Josh crying on the phone to his mother had resulted in his mother standing in my living room with a scraper and a borrowed truck. And whatever grief existed in that situation, it did not excuse this. "I'm sorry he's upset," I said. "That doesn't change what you've done here." She exhaled slowly, the way people do when they're performing patience. "I threw out some old furniture and started freshening up the walls. That's not a crime, Callie." "Give me the key, Darlene." Her hand went to her purse strap, tightened around it, and I watched her make the decision. I could see it happening in real time, behind her eyes, to not give it to me, to hold it. Because the key was leverage, and Darlene understood leverage the way some people understood music, intuitively and completely. "I'll give it to Josh," she said. "He can bring it to you." And she picked up her purse, tucked the scraper into a tote bag she'd apparently brought for the purpose, and walked out of my condo without another word. The door clicked shut behind her. I listened to her footsteps in the hallway, measured and unhurried, and then the elevator chimed, and then there was nothing. Miso was still winding around my ankles. Fig had come down from the cat tree at some point and was sitting in the middle of the ravaged floor, staring at the front door with an expression of pure feline bewilderment that I felt in my entire body. I sat down on the floor, not because I chose to exactly, more because my legs made the decision for me. I sat on the hardwood floor of my stripped living room and looked at the wall Darlene had half destroyed and thought about the weekend I had spent hanging that wallpaper. 11 years ago. Josh had been there, handing me the level, making coffee, arguing cheerfully about whether the pattern was centered. We had ordered pizza at 9 o'clock at night because neither of us had thought to plan dinner. It had been a good day. I had genuinely loved my life that day. I pressed my palm flat against the floor and breathed. The thing about hitting bottom is that it doesn't always feel dramatic. Sometimes it feels like sitting on a cold hardwood floor with a cat on your lap and the taste of half a sandwich still in your mouth, looking at a wall that someone else decided to destroy, understanding that the person who was supposed to be your partner had, in a moment of grief and weakness, handed his mother the ammunition she had been waiting 19 years to use. I cried, eventually. Not for long. I'm not a long crier, never have been. My mother used to say I processed fast and moved on faster, and she meant it as a compliment even though it sometimes didn't feel like one. I cried for about 4 minutes, sitting on the floor with miso pressed against my side and Fig's weight settling onto my knee. And then I wiped my face with the back of my hand and sat very still for another minute. Then I picked up my phone and called my colleague Renata. Renata Osei taught 7th grade math at Ridgecrest and had been my closest friend at the school for 11 years. She was sharp and practical and had survived her own divorce 6 years ago with a precision I had quietly admired without ever imagining I would need to borrow it. She picked up on the first ring. "Hey, I was just thinking about you," she said. "How'd the rest of your day go?" "I need to ask you something," I said. "Do you still have your divorce attorney's contact information?" A pause. Not a long one. Renata didn't do long pauses. "Yeah," she said. "I do." "Callie, what happened?" I told her. All of it. The morning conversation with Josh, coming home to find Darlene, the wallpaper, the missing furniture, the key she wouldn't return, Josh hanging up the phone. I told it quickly, the way I would have told a student to summarize a chapter, just the facts, in order, with only the details that mattered. When I finished, Renata was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. Then she said, "Okay, first thing tomorrow, you call a locksmith and you change your locks. Tonight, you document everything. Every inch of that wall, every empty space where the furniture was, you photograph it all. You write down the time Darlene arrived, how long she was there, what she said, what she took. You do this right now, while the details are fresh." "I'm a teacher, Renata. I don't know anything about—" "Neither did I," she said. "That's why you call the attorney. Her name is Beverly Cho. She's in Worthington. She does not mess around." I heard Renata moving, probably pulling up her contacts. "I'm texting you her number right now. Call her first thing in the morning. Some family law attorneys do quick consultations. Beverly definitely does. Tell her exactly what you told me." My phone buzzed. Beverly Cho, attorney at law, a Worthington number. "And Callie?" Renata's voice was gentler now, the way it got when she was done being practical and was being a friend instead. "Are you okay? Actually okay?" I looked at the torn wall, the pile of curled paper strips on the floor, the bare shelves where my books had been. "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "I think I will be." "Good enough," she said. "Now go take those pictures." I did. I spent 40 minutes walking through every room of my condo with my phone camera, photographing the damage methodically and without emotion, the way I imagined a crime scene investigator might. The stripped wall from 4 different angles, the adhesive residue already hardening on the drywall, the empty floor where the couch had stood for 3 years, the scuff marks where something had been dragged across the hardwood. I photographed the cat trees pushed into the corner. I photographed the unfamiliar boxes stacked along the far wall. Darlene had apparently been planning to bring things in as well as take them out, though she hadn't gotten that far. When I was done, I sat at my kitchen table. The kitchen, at least, was untouched, and I opened a new note on my phone and wrote down everything I remembered, with times. Arrived home approximately 6:15 p.m. Found Darlene Hargrove on step stool removing wallpaper. Wallpaper on accent wall approximately 60% removed. Couch removed from premises. Green velvet reading chair removed from premises. Darlene stated items were donated via neighbor Terence, last name unknown. Darlene refused to return key when asked directly. Darlene left voluntarily at approximately 6:45 p.m. I read it back. Then I added one more line. Key to property still in possession of Darlene Hargrove as of this writing. Property has not been resecured. That last sentence sat there and looked at me. I called the building's management office and got the after-hours line. A man named Dave picked up, sounding like I had woken him from a nap, and I explained, as calmly as I could, that I needed to know the procedure for rekeying my unit. He told me that for owner-occupied units, I could arrange my own locksmith and just needed to provide the office with a new key copy within 30 days. I thanked him and wrote down the name of the locksmith he recommended. Then I went online and found Beverly Cho's law firm website. The bio photo showed a woman in her mid-50s with reading glasses pushed up on her head and an expression that suggested she had heard everything and was not impressed by most of it. Her practice areas were listed cleanly: divorce, property disputes, asset protection. The firm's office hours started at 8:30. I set an alarm for 8 o'clock. Then I made myself toast. The bread was still there, the kitchen was still mine, and I sat at the table with miso on the chair beside me and fig circling my feet hopefully. And I ate, and I thought, and I did not cry again. Here is what I understood by the time I went to bed that night. The morning conversation with Josh had been vague enough that it could have meant anything. What I said and what he heard might not have been the same thing. But what he did with whatever he heard, calling Darlene, apparently in pieces, apparently in a way that sent her directly to my address with a scraper and a borrowed truck, that was a choice. And Darlene entering my property, removing my furniture, damaging my walls, refusing to return my key, those were choices too. A chain of choices. And the thing about a chain is that it doesn't matter where it starts. What matters is where you grab it. I was going to grab it at the locksmith, and then at Beverly Cho's office, and then, if necessary, somewhere else entirely. I turned off the kitchen light and walked to the bedroom. Through the window, the April night was clear and cold, the street below quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like the moment before something begins, rather than the moment after something ends. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Josh. "We need to talk. Can I come by tomorrow?" I looked at it for a long moment. Then I put the phone face down and closed my eyes. Because tomorrow was going to require everything I had, and I needed to be steady for it. And whatever Josh needed to say to me could wait until after I had changed the locks on my door. The locksmith arrived at 7:58 the next morning, 2 minutes before I'd even finished my coffee. His name was Dale. He was efficient and cheerful in the way of people who spend their days solving problems that feel catastrophic to everyone else. And by 8:23, he had replaced every lock on my front door and handed me 3 new keys. I gave one to building management as Dave had instructed. The second I put on my keychain. The third I held in my hand for a moment before sliding it into an envelope I addressed to my own name, which I tucked into the drawer of my bedside table. A backup. A record. Evidence that I had secured my own home. At 8:31, I called Beverly Cho's office. The receptionist, professional, warm, not the kind of warm that wastes your time, asked for a brief summary and told me Beverly had a cancellation at 10 o'clock if I could make it to Worthington. I said I could make it to Worthington. I called the school, reached the front office, explained I had a personal emergency and needed a sub for the morning. My department head, Mr. Calloway, covered for me without a single question, which is the kind of thing that makes you appreciate a workplace in ways you never expected. Beverly Cho's office was on the second floor of a brick building off High Street, and she was exactly what her photo had suggested. Mid-50s, reading glasses pushed up on her head, an expression that had seen everything. She had a notepad and a pen, and she did not look at her phone once during the 45 minutes we sat together. I told her everything. The morning conversation with Josh, the ambiguity of it, the fact that no one had said the word divorce directly, at least not to each other. I told her about coming home to find Darlene, the wallpaper, the missing furniture, the key. I showed her the photographs, all of them. I had organized them into a folder on my phone the night before, labeled with timestamps. Beverly looked through every one without rushing. Then she set the phone down and folded her hands on the desk. "The condo," she said. Title is solely in your name. Yes, my name on the deed, my name on the mortgage. And your husband had a key. For emergencies, we never had anything in writing about that, but he acknowledged it verbally in front of our realtor when we bought the property. I can contact the realtor. Do that, Beverly said. Get anything in writing you can. Now, the furniture. You said she told you it was donated. She said her neighbor Terrence took it to a donation center. She didn't specify which one. That's conversion of property, Beverly said, without drama, the way someone might say the weather looks like rain. Removal of personal property belonging to the titled owner without consent. Combined with the property damage, she nodded at the photos, and the refusal to return the key, you have a civil claim. It's not a criminal case. Probably, unless you want to push for it. But you have grounds for small claims at minimum, depending on the value of what was taken. The couch was about $1,200 when I bought it. The chair I reupholstered myself. The frame was $200 at an estate sale. The fabric and labor probably another $350. Beverly wrote that down. Document the replacement cost, not just original purchase. And the wall repair. You'll want a contractor estimate. Drywall repair, repainting or re-wallpapering, labor. I had already thought of this. I had not done it yet, but I had thought of it. I'll get that this week. Good. She put down her pen and looked at me directly. Now, the marriage. You said you and your husband had a conversation that morning. You did not use the word divorce? I said I thought we needed to talk about where we were going. He said he thought so too. That was the extent of it. And he interpreted that apparently as sufficient reason to call his mother in a state of distress and tell her the marriage was ending. I paused. Which then sent her to my property with a scraper. Beverly's expression didn't change, but something in it sharpened by a degree. Has he responded to your call from last night? He texted, said he wanted to come by and talk. Don't let him in until the locks are changed, she said. Which you've done this morning. Good. You're ahead of this. She leaned back slightly. Callie, here's where you are. You have a condo in your name. You have a marriage in a parent crisis. You have a mother-in-law who has caused documented, photographable damage to your sole-titled property. Those are 3 separate issues and they need to stay separate in your mind, because conflating them is how people make bad decisions. She picked up her pen again. I'd like to represent you if you want to move forward. The immediate priority is the property damage and the missing items. The marriage, that conversation happens at your pace, when you're ready, and I'll be here for that too. I said yes. We signed a retainer agreement before I left. Josh showed up at the condo at 6 that evening. I had known he would, regardless of whether I'd responded to his text, because Josh had never been able to sit with unresolved tension for more than 24 hours. I had left school by 4, gone home, fed the cats, changed out of my work clothes, and made a pot of coffee. I was sitting at the kitchen table with Beverly's card and my documentation folder in front of me when his key failed at the door. I heard him try it twice, then a knock. I opened the door. He looked tired. Not guilty tired, just tired. The face of a man who had spent the night somewhere uncomfortable and hadn't slept well. He was wearing the same jacket he'd had on the previous morning, which meant he'd either slept at his office or at Darlene's, and either option told me something. You changed the locks, he said. Yes. Callie. Come in, I said. Sit down. He came in. He stopped in the doorway of the living room and looked at the wall, the half-stripped accent wall, the adhesive residue, the pile of paper curls I hadn't cleaned up yet, deliberately, because I wanted him to see it exactly as I had found it. Something moved across his face. Not quite guilt, more like the expression of a man who understood, for the first time, the physical consequence of a phone call he'd made in a moment of emotion. Mum went a little overboard, he said. I looked at him for a long moment. Josh, she removed my furniture. She damaged the wall. She refused to return the key. I have an attorney now. He turned to look at me. You hired an attorney. I had a consultation this morning, yes. His jaw tightened. Don't you think that's a little... No, I said. I don't. I pulled out the chair across from me and nodded at it. Sit down, please. He sat. I poured him a coffee because 19 years of marriage makes some habits automatic, and then I sat across from him with my hands flat on the table, and I said what I had been organizing in my mind since the night before. I need to know exactly what you said to your mother. He wrapped both hands around the mug, stared at it. I called her after you left for school. I was upset. I told her things between us had been bad for a while, and that I thought it might really be over this time. This time, I said, as if we'd had this conversation before. He looked up. We've been circling it for 2 years, Callie. You know that. I know we've been struggling. I don't know that I've ever said the word divorce to you. You didn't have to say it. His voice was tired, not defensive. I could feel it. And the unfair thing, the truly unfair thing, was that he wasn't entirely wrong. I had been feeling it too. That slow, silent withdrawal that you keep telling yourself is just the gravity of a long marriage. But feeling something and acting on it are different things. And what I said next came out steadier than I expected. Josh, what you felt and what you told your mother sent her to my property with a scraper. My property. My name on the deed. You understand that what she did wasn't just hurtful, it was legally actionable. He flinched at that word. She didn't mean, Josh. I leaned forward slightly. Stop finishing her sentences for her. She's 63 years old. She knew exactly what she was doing. She has known for 19 years that this condo is mine. You said it yourself, in front of our realtor. And the moment she had what she thought was permission, the moment you handed her that permission, she walked straight here and started taking it apart. He was quiet for a long moment. Miso padded in from the hallway, glanced at him with mild indifference, and jumped onto the counter, which she knew she wasn't supposed to do. Neither of us moved to stop her. What do you want? Josh said finally. Not aggressive, genuinely asking. Right now? I want the donation center address so my attorney can determine whether my furniture is recoverable. I want a written acknowledgement that the damage to this wall was caused by your mother entering without my consent. And I want to know, clearly, out loud, using the actual word, whether you want a divorce. He looked at me across the table. 49 years old, rumpled, tired, holding a coffee mug in both hands the same way he had at the DMV 22 years ago, when he'd made a joke about the number system and surprised me into laughing. I felt a grief that had nothing to do with anger, just the plain, clean sadness of something ending. I think so, he said quietly. Yeah, I think we've been done for a while. I'm sorry I didn't say it better. Me too, I said. And I meant both things. Sorry it had come to this, and sorry I hadn't said it better either. We sat there for a moment in the particular silence of two people who have just agreed on something difficult and true. Then I slid Beverly's card across the table to him. Get your own attorney. We'll do this right. Darlene I handled differently. Beverly sent a formal letter, certified mail, return receipt, 3 days later. It outlined the property damage, the estimated replacement value of the removed furniture, the cost of wall repair per the contractor estimate I'd obtained, and the legal basis for each claim. It requested reimbursement of $2,140, itemized. It also noted, in clean, unambiguous language, that any further unauthorized entry to the property would result in a trespass complaint. I was told later, by Josh, who told me in the careful, neutral way of a man trying to be fair during a process neither of us had wanted, that Darlene had read the letter at her kitchen table and said, "She's bluffing," that she had called her own son and told him I was being vindictive, that I was using lawyers to punish her for trying to help, that this was proof of exactly the kind of person I had always been. I was also told that Josh had said, quietly, "Mum, she's not bluffing, and you did go into her home without asking." Darlene did not respond to Beverly's letter within the requested 10-day window, so Beverly filed in small claims court. The hearing was on a Thursday morning in late May, 6 weeks after the night I had come home to find my wall in pieces. The courtroom was small and fluorescent lit and smelled like old carpet and bureaucratic patience. I sat at one table with Beverly beside me. Darlene sat at the other table with a look on her face like she had been forced to attend an event she found beneath her. She had not brought an attorney. Beverly presented the photographs, the timestamps, the contractor estimate, $860 for drywall repair and repainting, the documentation on the furniture, and a written statement from the realtor, a woman named Phyllis Garner, confirming that at the time of purchase, both Josh and I had verbally established that the condo was my sole asset and that any key provided to Josh was for emergency use only. Darlene, when the judge asked her to respond, said that she had been trying to help her son, that the furniture had been worn, and that she had not believed she was doing anything wrong. The judge, a compact woman in her 60s, with the demeanor of someone who had heard every variation of this story, looked at her for a moment and then said, "Ma'am, whether you believed you were doing something wrong is not the legal standard. The standard is whether you had authorization to remove property from a residence you did not own. Did you?" Darlene opened her mouth, closed it. "No," she said finally. "Judgment for the plaintiff," the judge said. $2,140 plus court costs. I didn't feel triumphant when she said it. I felt something quieter than that. The satisfaction of a sentence that ended correctly, the right punctuation in the right place. The divorce took 8 months from start to finish. It was not simple, but it was not vicious either, which I think surprised both of us. Josh and I divided the Sycamore Hills house equitably. It sold in September, and after the mortgage was paid off, we each walked away with enough to matter. He kept his 401k intact, I kept mine. We argued briefly, and then not at all, about a set of bookshelves I had built myself, which I won, and a cast-iron skillet he had received from his grandfather, which he won. We were, by the end of it, almost polite in a way that felt genuinely new, like we had finally found the register we should have been communicating in all along. Darlene paid the judgment. It arrived as a check, no note, mailed to Beverly's office. Beverly sent it to me with a brief email. Received and deposited. I used the money for new wallpaper, not the same floral pattern, but something I had seen in a design store in Columbus that I had been thinking about for months. A deep sage green with a subtle texture that made the accent wall look like it had always been that color, like it had been waiting for this all along. Renata came over the weekend I hung it. We ordered Thai food, and she handed me the level, and we argued pleasantly about whether the pattern was centered, and at 9 o'clock we ate spring rolls at the kitchen table, and I told her she had probably saved me 6 months of confusion by answering the phone that night. "You would have figured it out," she said. "Eventually," I agreed, "but you made it faster." That's the thing about the people who answer on the first ring. You don't always know, in the moment, how much that's going to matter. Miso is asleep on the new couch, a deep charcoal grey sectional that I chose by myself, that I paid for by myself, that fits the room in a way nothing else quite has. Fig is on the windowsill, watching the street below with the focused intensity he reserves for squirrels and delivery trucks. The wall behind them is sage green and straight and entirely, undeniably mine. I teach 8th grade English in the mornings, and I come home to a quiet that isn't draining anymore. I still believe that words matter, that saying the right thing at the right moment can change everything. I have simply learnt, at 46, to make sure I'm saying them to the right attorney.